Billionaires don't go into the fashion show mall to buy anything,
Right.
right? They call their guy, they call their concierge service,
Yeah.
right? And that's something that Best Buy cannot do as well, which is concierge. Give me your phone number. I don't want to deal with the fluff
Right.
or any of the noise, right? They call an eagle, right? And they say, hey, this is my guy. These guys are professionals. I have his direct phone number.
Right.
I don't have to call 1-800-GEEK-SQUAD. I don't have to go into the store. So, there is an ethos to this market that just doesn't go in.
Hello, everybody. This is Elevation with Chris Oram, the show where we talk to individuals who have climbed the ladder of success. I'm joined today by a very special guest, a Las Vegas local, and someone who works in the custom integration industry, and that is Robert Lodge. And Robert Lodge has a 2-decade career in custom integration, previously working for Best Buy Magnolia, and now working for a local Las Vegas speaker manufacturer. You may have heard of it, folks. This is Origin Acoustics, and we have Robert Lodge joining us today. So I welcome Robert to the show. Thank you for being here, Robert.
Thanks for having me. I couldn't be any more excited to be here. This is my first podcast, so I want to say thank you very much for having me.
Hell yeah, bro. Very, very happy to have you here. I always love speaking to people in our industry. We have a ton in common. We can basically geek out on our whole smart home technology. You and I had a little pre-podcast chat about your background and what's your expertise is in the smart home industry. So I'm definitely looking forward to learning more about you and having to share your story with the people. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Cool. So you have a 2-decade career in Best Buy Magnolia. Talk us through how you got that job, how you worked your way up, and how that transition happened. And just talk to me about your overall experience with Best Buy.
Absolutely, man. I will say first and foremost, I am so happy for my Best Buy career. I mean, I started there when I was 18 years old. How I got the job was my best friend. He worked there. Mm-hmm. Hey, man, do you want to get a job? And I said, yeah. At that time, my father owned a small business.
Okay.
And right after 9/11, he lost it. My dream was to take over the print industry. Mm-hmm. Subsequently, my father works at Origin Acoustics, and he is our commercial grille printer.
Nice.
So as he lost his business, I really needed something to do. I needed to make some money. My best friend was like, hey, man, come get a job. And I started out selling boom boxes because the way it worked at Best Buy is if you were a good salesman, they put you in computers or they put you in home theater. If you were an okay salesman, they put you in appliances. And if you weren't a great salesman, you were CDs, DVDs, front lanes, right, ringing out people. And that was the way that they kind of provisioned their people.
Right.
So I started out in the audio section, which is home theater in a box and boom boxes. And after you did well there, selling service plans and selling upgraded wire, you went to the lanes, which was tube TVs at the time. And then if you were good there and you were able to get your monster power centers and your S-video cables and your VHS DVD combinations, then they moved you to the projection screens, right? And then they talked to you about, being able to create, a bigger basket. How do you combine together audio and video? And I did sales for a number of years, and I was successful at that. And I got an opportunity then to go to install, and that basically happened because I was a really good salesman, but I also was the guy who fixed everything in the showroom, right? So it was like by default, I became an installer, and really it just made more money at the time, and I became an installer, and from there, Best Buy developed their HEA program, which was their outside sales program, and I was the first release of that. Okay. And that's where I did kind of outside sales consulting, and that was incredibly fun. I learned a number of lessons, right? Like in transactional selling, when people walk into your showroom floor, they're there for the core offer rate. They're there for the laptop. They are there for the TV, right? But what you sell them is kind of a given because they're coming there. But as a young man here in Las Vegas doing more relationship-based selling, knowing how to follow up and understanding your offer rates for things I knew nothing about, right? From there, I ended up moving to Dallas, Texas, and taking a very, very similar job, the same exact job, just in Dallas. And I had a really good mentor at that time. His name's Jeremy Potter.
Nice. Shout out Jeremy.
Shared some words with me, man. Like, my numbers weren't good. We were number 7 in the country at a store level because when I went to Dallas, I had to park at the store for 3 months because they didn't have a position. So we went and we were number 7 in the store, and I was really good. Got moved back to my old position because that's how their resources worked. If they had something for you, they'd give it to you, and if they didn't have it, they'd park you somewhere. And they kept my money. So I was there for about 3 months, and I was struggling, man. There are other guys doing better than me.
Yeah.
And he's like, you got to figure out your offer rates. You got to be able to kind of predict where you're going with some of these sales. You need to be on the front side. If you were reacting to clients, you're already behind.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb went in my head. And I started figuring out how to follow up with customers and how to meet them in the store and how to qualify customers so I wasn't wasting my time because you know, young man, I was just really, really nice. I wanted to sell everything. But when you start figuring out, you know, how much of time it takes to get to the job, and then you get there and you find out that they only want a TV, it's like, you know, I wasn't able to produce numbers. So I was really started to pre-qualify and really understand some of my offer rates. And overnight did exceptionally better. Okay. And then from there, I think I was about top 20 in the company, maybe 25 or so at that time.
So just to quickly pause you there. So you learned valuable business skills, valuable sales skills. So one example that I can compare to is, you know, maybe your standard Best Buy employee is an order taker. Someone comes in, they say, I want a TV. They supply the TV. And what you're talking about is moving beyond that and bundling services together, selling packages, anticipating client needs, seeing what else you can do to, you know, boost the overall sales at Best Buy and make, you know, a higher ticket offer.
Yeah, right. When they come in the sale, it's like, I call it theater. It's real fun. It's fun.
Right.
You get to say kind of whatever you want, and you get to make relationship with your client, and they take the sale where you want to go. But it's theater.
And you're also driving that train. You're navigating how this person should be, you know, walk through the sales process.
Yep, but in relationship-based selling, you got to learn to meet the customer where they're at, which is a very unique skill that you know I had to learn, and it was sink or swim.
How long did it take you to learn these skills? So you mentioned a light clicked for you.
Yep, a light clicked for me. So in transactional selling, at store selling, that was always easy for me. I did okay here in Las Vegas. I was within my peer group.
Okay.
In Dallas, the system sizes were larger, and to learn to qualify those was a little bit of a struggle. So it was, I would say, my first 6 months, I was real disappointed. And then I just had some conversations with my manager. Hey, man, I want to help you, right? Let's talk. Give me 30 minutes of your time. And then literally overnight, I was able to take those, which is understand your core offer rate, right? What it is that you provide, and then understand that you need to meet the customers where they are, right? And those two things. And overnight, I was like, big sale, big sale, big sale. And I was like, fantastic. I always knew you had it, right? You just needed to tweak a couple of those small things, right? So after that, you know, I'm kind of a perpetual nerd, if I'm honest, right?
Me too.
So
me too.
I ended up, I'm like, I'm going to go be a project manager. I'm going to oversee all these big installations.
Yep.
And I went back into installation to polish up some of the skills that I needed, because at that time I didn't know anything about HDMI matrices. I didn't know anything about audio matrices. I didn't know anything about networking. I was a real good cable rat. I could crawl through attics and I could install almost anything. But at that point in time, I didn't have a whole lot of rack experience, things of that nature. So I went back because I wanted to be a project manager, and I did that for 2 years, and I was incredibly fortunate because I was the first round of remote hires for the corporate engineering program at Magnolia. And the way that Best Buy worked was they invested into a tool called Budget Builder. This was the salesperson's frontline tool for qualifying customers. And basically it was an iPad app, and you can drag different solutions into different room categories, and then it would give you a plus or minus to qualify them on budget. And once the salesperson got the scope of work and was able to qualify that budget, they would fill out a form and they'd send it up to corporate.
Yep.
Then corporate would actually do the line by line.
Yep.
And then they would send it to the salesperson. The salesperson would then get the signature, collect the deposit. It would come back to engineering, where we would do the floor plans, then the rack elevation, the theater elevation, a full schematic. And then from there, we would take our schematic and we would send it to the network program managers, which is another group of guys that programmed like every system in the country.
Yeah.
They would send that rack over to Rack Build, where it would get everything wire ID'd, labeled, and they'd ship it out to the job site, where they would take that and they would wire it into like a distributed audio video enclosure. So you could take that rack and just unwhip it and move it.
That's pretty cool.
Right. So I always said my job was to give a list of parts and a list of instructions and give that to our install team.
Yeah.
And then they had the support from programming. They had the support from Rack Build, and they would go in and get in and out of the home, significantly faster because we had all of that structure and all of that rhythm and all of that process. The other thing that's kind of unique about Best Buy, and I don't think a lot of people realize this. So I don't know what the record is now, but the record used to be the largest customer project in Magnolia history. It's $1.7 million. Like, people don't realize that stuff was a kind of a regular occurrence. I didn't have anything on my desk for less than $300,000, and you got all these CI guys out here, mom and pops, doing the Lord's work, out there hustling with their families, trying to make ends meet. And, you tell them that, and they're like, oh, my God, I had no idea that Best Buy had some of those capabilities. Now, subsequently, the company has changed quite a bit, and some of those resources, some of those capabilities, I think, have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. But that is the growing and the changing, I think, of our industry.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have a question on that. So it sounds like Best Buy really had their stuff together.
Yeah.
So they have a, I don't know if they have a global footprint, but they have a footprint in every United State. They have this great process. They have these people behind it. They have the physical store locations. Why is Best Buy not the leader in custom integration today?
If it's hard to say, I believe, in all honesty, it lacks a little nimbleness of the process. Like, you have got to know exactly what the process is, and you have to have a salesman to be on the front side to kind of plant that seed. Yeah. Right. And say, this is the next step. Right. I've done, X, Y, and Z for you. And that's a process that not every customer can fit into, and it's clearly evident, right, with, the more concierge service, right? Like, we have one of our brands at Origin as Bang & Olufsen, right? And one of my real good friends, one of my early mentors, rest in peace, Chris Fu, he ended up working for him for like 6 or 7 years, and he was in the Fashion Show Mall, right? Well, billionaires don't go into the Fashion Show Mall to buy anything, right? They call their guy, they call their concierge service, right? And that's something that Best Buy cannot do as well, which is concierge. Give me your phone number. I don't want to deal with the fluff or any of the noise, right? They call an Eagle, right? And they say, hey, this is my guy. These guys are professionals. I have his direct phone number. I don't have to call 1-800-GEEK-SQUAD. I don't have to go into the store. So, there is an ethos to this market that just doesn't go in to retail stores 100%. And that's the point, like, where you got to meet the customer where they're at. And not everybody can, Best Buy can't meet every customer where they're at.
Right. And they want to have, you talk about transactional selling versus relationship selling. They want to have a point of contact that they can reach out to, and I want to actually talk to a person, because I know how frustrating it can be when you call somewhere and it takes 10 minutes or never to get to a person.
Absolutely.
So I guess I'm interested to see where the custom integration field goes, because there's this company called Daisy that's currently trying to franchise all over the nation. So I kind of see a parallel to what they're doing with Best Buy. They want to be kind of the one-stop shop for custom integration rather than these mom-and-pop places. But, it would seem that Best Buy would have had the resources to be tremendously successful and kill all the mom-and-pop shops.
They were absolutely very successful. The Magnolia brand at one point, and this was the number that I heard, and this was, 2016 or 17, it made up $1 billion of their total brand evaluation. So there was a time where they were incredibly successful. So one of my little side hobbies for Origin is I do and work a lot with Jason Sand. He's kind of one of those process architect guys, right? Like, I'm the guy who makes all the freaking flow charts at Origin. I just show them to like management, and they're like, great.
Yeah.
Right? But a lot of that structure, right? Like if you as a CI organization have a bunch of CI salesmen, I think of it like this. You need to be like a football team, right? Like Steve Young was short, right? And he dropped back in the pocket, but he'd have to lead Jerry Rice blindly. Your salespeople and your installation people need to kind of have that relationship. So when I'm saying things as a salesperson, one, I have a little bit more credibility. Two, my installers don't completely fucking hate me because I gave them a terrible scope of work on something that they shouldn't have been doing, in the first place. So having, a more structured company, I think really will take maybe somebody who's not a CI guy and make him more successful quickly if this is the industry that he wants to get into, because we have these consultants, Matt Bernath, Jason Sand, and all these guys put out their content simply so these businesses have a higher net operating profit after taxes, right? Like you can run and gun all day, but to a certain point, that hustle mentality, I can only prescribe to a certain amount of that hustle mentality, right? Like it's just running around saying, hey, do you want to buy stuff? And that really doesn't work. You got to have a disciplined rhythm about how you follow up and this and that, right? So what does your daily business rhythm look like, right? And I think as a sales guy, the right mix is about 70% revenue generating activities against 30% daily business tasks.
Got it.
All right.
And then you mentioned that Best Buy has this tremendous process, and behind this tremendous process, they have large quantities of data on their customers and things in that category. So talk to me about the data, the metrics, things like that in custom integration, and what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah. So one of the when I was early installer, I used to get 5 hours to mount a TV. Man, that was real fun because a TV only took me like an hour or two. And granted, they were the, 150-pound Pioneer Elites, but you'd get 2 jobs a day. And the company looked at it like, we're not being efficient. So I was a part of, I think, the ugly time of efficiency where my manager would sit behind me and was like, hey, man, we're time recording everybody. And if you can't meet these times, you're going to get rid of. The one and only time I ever had it wasn't even a damage claim, but the one and only time I put my foot through somebody's ceiling was my boss was hustling me, trying to get those data numbers, right? The other thing that they would do is they had a utilization number. So all of your managers, when they would look at the daily job board, they could go into your individual profile in the system and go, he's 120% efficient. So they would double schedule your jobs, right? So that was the way they were able to synthesize efficiency through their installation. But the data that they were able to get on all their customers and all their employees was freaking insane, man. Like they had client segmentations. You could put in somebody's phone number. You kind of knew what their buying power was. Individually, every one of your salespeople were individually scorecarded. So when you look at where you're at every single month, you go, okay, this is the things that I can tweak. I did this tweak and this improved this number and this tweak, and it was kind of a game, right? It's like, just make all of these things green and your manager will love you. And if they're all yellow, you're not getting in trouble. And if they're all red, you're probably going to get moved. Right?
It's an interesting type of motivation because almost people would want to work slower so that they didn't get pushed harder. So it's like, but that's not optimal for the company. So it's like finding that balance act between being too metric heavy where you're pushing and you're being unrealistic and then the quality goes down. And then the other side where you are having guys just wasting company time and money.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So yeah, they were able to kind of really synthesize a lot of data about their people and about their clients and then what it took to to be successful. As far as like technology is concerned, right? Everything that Best Buy or Magnolia deployed was fully vetted by a team of corporate people, and they were a part of, they called it the C7 lab, right? And anything and everything that Best Buy sold, they brought in demo products, right? And they'd run it through this wheel and they'd write a white paper for it. But we had a $20,000 HDMI cable checker. We verified that they could do all of these things. When we were doing like HDMI matrix, it went to the corporate nerd that brought it home that did all of the vetting and verifying. Then they wrote deployment papers. So when our technicians were going out, it was a pre-vetted, pre-verified solution, which I think is huge for CI guys because nobody wants to throw up Hail Marys, because when you throw up Hail Marys, you're there until 10 o'clock figuring out, like, nobody wants to be the guy reading the manual on the customer's couch. And I have been there a lot, right? But those are kind of the things that make you more efficient in the home. Don't do Hail Marys. Know what you're doing, write the documentation, and this all goes back to, the football mentality. Like, how do you lead your installation team? Well, you lead them with a deployment guide, right? Do a little bit of the research. Don't just, it's funny that I work for a manufacturer now, but there was a point in time in my career where it was, don't trust a manufacturer. Yeah. Never trust a manufacturer. And it's like, you're in the smart home space. How many, X, Y, and Z comes out and it's great. And you're like, oh, this doesn't work. We're waiting for a new patch. Or we're waiting for a new update. Or, this product, we thought it was going to be great, but somebody didn't verify it. And that stuff happens. Right. All the time, And that stuff, when it fails in the client's home, is not your fault, but it is your fault because you are the face for the customer, and you made that recommendation for Control 4 or Savant or Origin or Crestron, you name it. It's your responsibility. I think it's important to lead with, at least some vetted and some verified solutions out there in order for you to be efficient in the home. Because, time is money. And what's more important than money? Time.
Mm-hmm. And folks, for those watching at home, it's always the integrator's fault. Regardless if it's the manufacturer, user error, anything, the dealer always gets the blame. So that's just the facts of the business, essentially.
Right.
But it can be so frustrating, I'm sure, as a customer when you spend all this money and things don't work.
Yeah. So I say this, to some of our dealers come in, but if you haven't been on the other side, the CI side, and you have a customer calling you at midnight, screaming at you because they can't remember their Apple TV password because they've had 5 bottles of wine that evening, like, that means something. You got to understand where people are at. And I think some people in manufacturing don't truly understand what it's like to be on the other side because those calls are not fun. The calls that I have aren't fun. Those calls are twice as bad. So when that dealer is upset with me, like, dude, he had it twice as bad as I did. More than likely.
And sometimes I'll go to a manufacturer because a client is pushing so hard for almost something that can't happen. And it's like, I'll be the messenger and relay it to the manufacturer, but like, I don't think that what you're requesting is going to happen. But I'll try. I'll go to bat for you on your behalf.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So bring us back to Best Buy. So at some point, Best Buy allows you to become a prominent figure within Lutron, correct?
Yeah. So after I got to be an engineer, and if I'm honest, right, like, I'm just a career like AV guy. When I got my engineering job, I went to corporate, got my first week of training, got home from that training with like, oh my God, I messed up. I oversold myself. Like, this is really, really challenging. And my boss told me, he's like, hey man, it's going to take you a year. Just take you a year. And he was 100% right. 6 months later, I felt a little bit better. A year in, I'm like, oh, I did this, man. This was really hard, but I felt very proud of the body of work that I did. And I was fortunate to be in Dallas. That was an incredibly good market. And then Magnolia was like, hey man, we want to get into Lutron Homeworks. We had one guy kind of doing it. He was the director of technology. And we just want to deregulate it and grow it. They sent us to Lutron school, and we got our homework certification. I come back to Dallas. We're doing homeworks now.
Nice.
I was fortunate to have a lot of relationships in Dallas with both the salespeople because I was their installer and all the installers. So I was like, hey, man, I want to go after homeworks. I had another manager that was really, really big on this lighting thing. And I ended up turning over, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 projects in that first year. And because of that, I just became the de facto lighting guy because it's what I did a lot. So my job was a lot of phone calls with electricians. I would mock up all the floor plans for load schedules. I do the fixture schedule. And then it was then remotely program it or fly out to the client's house and then program it. And then after we kind of grew that program, somebody in corporate, a bean counter, just started pulling numbers. They're like, why is Homeworks like at 1.2 million and Radio Raw is at like like 500 or 600,000, something changed. What is it? And they're like, oh, it's just Robert. And then they grew the project a little bit more, and they started training out to other people. And then we added one of my really good friends was the lead programmer in Dallas, who brought him in to be the programmer. So I was engineering, and then he started doing the programming, and it just kind of grew and grew and then grew. Was able to do a Savant DMX project. That was real fun. That was about $200,000, right? And it finally came to fruition, and it looks really, really, really cool. RGBW, circadian rhythm, the whole nine. And then right about then, the company really started to transition. Like my paycheck, right? My paycheck actually said Magnolia AV on it. They converted it. It moved to Best Buy. I got moved under Geek Squad, which is a completely different mentality about how to do things, right? It is the custom versus cookie cutter. And there was a lot of culture change. And about that time, you know, not only myself, but a number of really, really talented engineers, and they just kind of ended up moving on. And I'm here at Origin now, and that was, you know, that was about, I've been at Origin for a year and a half. So,
all right, so you jumped to your transition to Origin Acoustics, but behind the scenes, you were telling me a little bit about fate and being at the right place at the right time. That's how you got this job. Talk to us about that.
So I was one of the very, very first, you know, regional hires. Nobody really knew about it. I think I ended up beating out about 40 people for it, but I had a lot of company history. I was the installer of the group. You know, the other guys, one was a former owner operator, and the other one was another kind of like AutoCAD drafts guy. And then we were the first hire. And, you know, I kind of say this, you know, in your career, you should be earning or learning. I learned, man. I learned so much, and I'm so thankful for some of those just lessons and experience, and to be around a lot of smart people that were smarter than me, that took some time, shared some lessons with me, right? And, you know, that was kind of it, you know, the personal thing, right? Like as far as me becoming an engineer and other things that I'm really fortunate for. So I talk a little bit about this, right? Like I think in the AV industry, like we have a lot of honestly rampant ADHD people, right? Like there's very few industries like ours because it's always new and it's always changing and it's exciting. And, you know, I love music, right? Like I'm incredibly passionate about music. I listen to way more music than I do TV, right? When I go home and I'm cooking for my family, I go to my Sonos Play 5, S1 app and go ahead and hit play, right? And that's what I kind of do to decompress. But when I was an installer, I, you know, was able to burn off all of that energy. I would have 10-hour days crawling through attics, grabbing road cheeseburgers. And I got home and I became this remote engineer, and it was the first time I'd ever worked in an office setting. It's the first time I'd ever really been behind a keyboard. And I was deficient in hard skills, right? And having and been an installer and had to have burned off all that energy. When I got in my house, I was losing it, bro. Losing it. Like there's a crack in the matrix. I don't know what's going on. And what I really figured out is I needed to live my life with just a little bit more discipline. I had to work out. You know, I joke with some of my bosses at work and I say, hey, I'm a Labrador. Like, I'll get the ball. You might have to be like, hey, sometimes the ball's over here, but I will get that ball. But if you don't take me out and you don't walk me, I will fuck up your house. Right. Like it's just one of those things. And it's, you know, it's my kids are very similar. School was a little challenging for me. And it's like, as a young man, I just wish somebody was like, hey man, it's not going to be all that difficult for the rest of your life, man. Like you're going to grow up, you're going to grow out of this. And Best Buy allowed me to grow up, and they gave me a home because it's, you know, I never had any real employment problems, but I made my fair share of mistakes, you know, and no call, no show because you went out with the boys and you're 21, man. Like that didn't happen a whole lot, but it happens to everybody, man. And they were able to let me grow and being remote and having to work behind a computer, I learned a lot of very important life lessons that I don't think I would have learned otherwise. Because I was always a grinder and always a hustler, and it was 12 hours a day and I'm in front of everybody, right? And since then, my life has completely changed, right? Having a little bit more rhythm, having more discipline, knowing that I need to wake up at a certain time, go to bed at a certain time, and if I do X, Y, and Z, I feel better, right? And we had talked a little bit, right? And it's like, You know, my wife is Metro. I have 3 girls.
Yeah.
One is 8 months old, and it's like I haven't been able to work out like I had normally. And I can definitely feel, you know, my health, my wellness, and my output. It's all decreased by about 15, 20%. But, bro, I got a family. Like, that's what you do for families, right? Like, that's what I'm doing. So I hope to get back into jiu-jitsu in the gym, like, real soon. But it's been interesting. My wife also tore her ACL about 3 months ago.
Bummer.
So we got an infant, and my wife is hobbling around. So it's been just me doing a lot of those things. So I've been a little more under-resourced, but I can tell in myself that I need to get back to a certain discipline and a certain rhythm, because that's where I truly feel best. And that's something that a lot of people and a lot of coaches that I looked up kind of say the same prescription and the same methodology for people who have ADHD. And guess what? It feels like half of this industry are just a bunch of high-strung maniacs. Right? I work at Origin. We're a bunch of high-strung maniacs. It's just how it is. And I think that's what, you know, kind of makes our industry unique, because there's a lot of real interesting and unique people, and there's never a dull moment at a CI event. There's never a dull moment, man.
And we know Origin throws some sick parties. If you haven't been to one of the Origin Acoustics CEDIA parties, you're missing out, folks. Make sure you hit the next one in Dallas this year.
They are insane.
Yeah. So I have a question. So when you're talking about that you're sitting in front of a screen, you are no longer feeling your best, how did you find out that maybe exercise or discipline was the way out? Is it because you tried it and you felt it and you're like, this is it, this is what I need? Or talk me through why you decided to come up from, you know, maybe this point where you were down.
Yeah. So honestly, I was at home. I had a little more time. I was like, I got to take better care of myself. I was getting married in a few months, and I wanted to look better on wedding photos. So I started going to a CrossFit gym. I didn't love it, but it was okay. And like, it was just, I started being able to hang more time in front of the computer. My mind was more clear. So it was really accidental. The whole ADHD thing, I had no idea. And it was right about that time I was on Facebook, and there was like one of those charts, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what's fucking wrong with me. Right? That's what's wrong with me. And then you start working out, and then I found something that I love, which is kind of like jiu-jitsu, right? Like, me going to the gym and counting to 10 3 times, good luck, bro. That is boring. Like, I can't do that.
We'll keep that for me, Robert.
Right?
You get on the mats, you know, you do the hardcore fighting, and I'll stick to counting to 10 in the gym.
Yeah, and I just didn't like that. So I found something that wasn't counting to 10. Right? It wasn't counting to 10. It was a little more flowy, and it was a lot more creative because I'm learning, right? So that's what kind of was the special recipe for me. It's just being able to get a little bit of exercise, having that time in my life, and then realizing as I'm getting older how much more important it is to me to focus on my discipline and on my rhythm. And if I can hit those things, I feel great. And if I don't hit those things, I feel terrible. And it is this, you know, it's just a night and day. And, you know, I don't know that I would have learned that unless he just locked me in my house 8-12 hours a day and let me live with some of those demons, trying to figure out, like, I just, you know, it's weird, man. But a lot of people are like that. I recommend, if you are, like, you know, somebody kind of in my range, like, adopt like a little bit of rhythm. It doesn't take much, like walking, right? Like, I can go get a 30-minute walk and I feel a lot better. Throw on my headphones, go for a walk, come home, get back at it, right?
So the whole show is about elevating and becoming the best version of yourself. And earlier you mentioned that when you became kind of in the engineering role, that you thought you had made a big mistake and that it took time for you to get up to speed. It took up to a year. And I want to draw a parallel because I had that kind of imposter syndrome when I went to Eagle Century. It's like, oh gosh, I made a big mistake. I don't know shit about electronics. I don't know wiring and video matrix and things like that. So I want to gather your perspective on how you deal with being a beginner, because we all do start at zero. And especially for something like jiu-jitsu. Like, I've tried jiu-jitsu, but I just saw myself as such a beginner, and I saw such a long road ahead that I quit. I gave up on it. And I want to hear about your mindset of how you got into jiu-jitsu and how you conquered, you know, that beginner's fear, I guess.
Yeah, you know, I am kind of a bull in the china shop. I just kind of get after it and stick with things, right? Like, anybody who starts jujitsu, I say, give it a year, man. You're going to get murdered for 1 year and, and at 6 months, and maybe that's the learning curve. And I know that's not, specifically, a unique answer, but it is perseverance, right? Like, Joe Rogan podcast and stuff. And he talks about how you need to do something hard every day, because if you do something hard every day, it makes your regular life challenges seem more insignificant.
Retweet.
Right? So it's like putting yourself in a challenging position is something I've always kind of done. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the adrenaline of doing something like that, but it's just getting after it, man, and just saying, hey, man, this is just one moment in time, and this moment in time is going to be gone. But if you stick with it, you're going to have a new moment of time and a whole new set of skills, and you're going to feel better about it, and just growing and moving, in the right direction, right? So I think it's just not getting down on yourself, just staying disciplined, work the process, right? You got all the mind coaches like, listen, work your process, right? Like one of the, couple of the guys that I draw like inspiration from, or like a couple of the SaaS sales guys, right? That sell like software that talk about, I got to do this, I got to do this. And if you do all your revenue generating activities, you get more time with your family, but they are 100% true. Right? Just a little bit of focus, a little bit of discipline.
I love that. It's great mindset. And I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like perseverance. Like if you quit, you're for sure never going to be good at anything. But, if you're bad today and you keep at it for a year, you're going to be better than you were a year ago. And if you keep at it for a decade, 2 decades, you're going to be a master in 2 decades.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. And I think, I've done that in my life. You've done that in your life. I'm sure everyone's done that in their life to a certain regard. I want to hear about your transition from kind of Best Buy to a speaker manufacturer. Specifically, you talked about that you were a lighting engineer. You didn't really touch on it too much, but a network engineer, and now you're working for a speaker manufacturer. But you love audio and music.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the story goes, I'd met Nick Berry. Shout out Nick Berry a few times.
Shout out Nick Berry.
In my youth, I met him at Speakercraft, met him at a couple of conferences, and then it was COVID CEDIA 2020 in Indiana.
Yep.
I was there to take my ESCD, and we were flying back from Indy to Las Vegas, and I was like, I'm gonna sit next to Nick Berry in the middle between.
So you knew who he was.
I knew who he was.
This was an intentional activity.
Yeah, for me it was intentional because I knew that my time was, it was time for a change, man. At 19 years, I couldn't be happier, and I wouldn't change any of that for the world. But it was time for a change, so I sat on a plane with him, got chatting a little bit. Gave him 30 minutes, put on my headphones, locked it down. Then he gave me his number, and literally out of the blue, a year later, he's like, hey, man, do you want to come work for me? And I said, absolutely. So what I do is I am Origin's nerd that they lock in a closet to figure out just about anything, and I oversee the design engineering department. And I don't draw all that much anymore, but I am out in front on phone with dealers trying to narrow down scopes of work, trying to narrow down scopes of vision, get that all nice and tight, very similar to like we did at Best Buy, so I can dump that to our engineering team, because I believe in a certain type of sales, right? We talked about transactional sales, right? And I make this triangle, right? Because you have transactional sales, and my methodology is, it is the Aristotle's persuasion triad, right? And on the one side, you have your emotional, right? And this is transactional. This is where you get people in and they're excited. Then you have relationship. These are people that come to Eagle and come to Origin and buy from us because we have relationships and they believe in our product. And then the last layer is the logic portion, right? And this is what I call specification-based sales.
Okay.
And Jason Sand talks about this, right? Human beings process images 60,000 times faster than written words. So I truly and honestly believe that rock solid documentation that's visual based helps garner our dealers' close rates to be much higher. And we're doing full heat mapping and dispersion for audio. So when you go to your client and you say, hey, listen, I went to the Origin engineers. They mocked this up. You can see all the dispersion patterns. Tell me what you think.
They say, wow, I'm sure every time.
Right? Like, this is on budget, it's on spec, and this looks like fantastic. Sign me up, right? The other thing that we do is, I kind of try and save dealers time, right? Like, I know what it feels like to have a cold dinner, right? I really do. And maybe it wasn't my own company, but I know what it feels like to be out in the field. And, you know, if you are doing a walk with a client and that client after an hour says, give me good, better, and best quotes, right? Like, usually to me, that means we're probably wasting a lot of time here because they don't know how much that money they want to spend. They just need to see all the options. Well, that's incredibly time consuming to a specifier to go in and budget all of this. Well, we at Origin in the design services, we'll do good, better, best quotes for you. So you just drop into our little portal, right? You go to originacoustics.com, you go down the bottom, request a design. And when you request that design, you can say, hey, I just need you guys to napkin draw this stuff and give me a good, better, best quote so I can go to my client and just qualify it. Hey, I went to the Origin engineers. They gave me a few options. Do you like the good one, the better one, or the best one? Here are my demos that support it, right? They're going to buy some demo gear. I have LSL 40s, 60s, and 6.5 HDs. This has 12s. This has 10s, right? And you know, we're a little bit more thoughtful than just replacing some of those speakers. Like we have all the dispersionary models, and then we mock up and we put pen to paper so you can go back to your client and ask them for money. There's something tangible about paperwork. And I learned this years ago selling warranties, right? So you build the relationship with the client and you have your warranty brochure in your back pocket. And what I would do is I'd take it up, open it, and I'd put it in their hands, right? And it becomes this kinesthetic manipulative. And then you go through and I'd memorize like the top 5 bullet points on the terms and conditions. Hey, it does this. You get 1 bulb repair. You get free cleaning and maintenance and this and that. And I believe simply giving the client this silly piece of paper, this tangible manipulative, made them either not think about the bullshit that you were selling them, or it gave credibility to the product. And it's somewhere in between, but having that tangible manipulative is the same exact thing for documentation. You're selling sound waves. But if you can show them the visual sound waves, I truly and honestly believe that it garners a much better close rate from dealers.
That's such an interesting concept because I know that people have used that strategy on me before. One time I've been presented with a black envelope. It's, hey, don't open this envelope until we tell you to. Not only am I looking at this envelope being like, oh my God, I wonder what's in it. But then once I open it up and someone can explain to me what's inside, it's like, wow, like, it's not a mind manipulation tactic, but it is human psychology to want to touch this thing and almost transition from what we're actually talking about to what's on this sheet of paper or this pamphlet, things like that.
It's like the B&W diamond tweeter effect. What is that? And you see 50-year-old men go, bink, on showroom floors all the time. And it's because human beings can't not touch things, and to give something manipulative does something psychological, right? You have auditory learners, you have visual learners, and you have kinesthetic learners. You know, that's the guy.
So Robert, I gotta give a quick shout out to my boy George. George is one of our Eagle Century technicians, but you mentioned something. You mentioned that a 50-year-old comes and touches everything. George will come into my office just about every morning, start touching my drinks, my monitor, but he knows the monitor's off limits now because every time he touches it, it turns off for a little bit. So maybe I need to get the cable fixed, but shout out to our boy George.
Shout out, George.
Cool. So let's keep the conversation rolling. So have you always been at your current role at Origin for the time you've been there?
For the most part, really for the most part, it was all the design specification stuff, trying to get all our dispersionary models set up. I got 4 seats of D tools rolling so we can specify a little bit easier. And it's everything that's under our portfolio. So commercial and heat mapping with ease, or our own homebrew heat mapping. It's all of our landscape designs. We do acoustic treatments. We got Bang & Olufsen, and we have Lighting Leaf. So we actually own a lighting company, so they can come to us and get like, you know, give me all your zone names, give me all your zone locations, give me all your device locations, and, you know, we'll calculate it out by lineal feet.
Okay, so talk to me about where Origin stands in the market. So there's tons of audio manufacturers.
Right, like we need an in-ceiling speaker company, like another one, like a hole in our head.
So how does Origin position themselves?
So, you know, we... The blood of the company goes back, and the history is to the very first in-wall speaker, and they had been OEMing speakers for everybody. And I would say at the end of the day, we are a bunch of CI guys that are incredibly passionate about audio, which is why we have a lot of our, unique features, like our toolless mounting. Like what I wouldn't have done for toolless mounting when I was an installer here, slamming in AIM 8.3s and a bunch of Eagle Sentry pre-wires, right? Like I had to go get the Tempo wire toner, so you guys didn't come out and Tempo wire tone it and steal my sales, right? So, it's that, I think, right? Like, what's that? I don't know. What was that?
It's working with the people that are going to be installing your products and making that their installation as easy as possible.
Yeah, so, that modularity, being able to sell in a system, right? Like, I would always do this with clients, and I always used to ask them, what's most important about this system? Give me your 2 or 3 top things, right? And when you key on those are the areas that you upsell. So it's like, hey, in here I'm going to do a D85. Over here I'm going to do D65s or D60s. Tell me what's important to you. Like, at the end of the day, what the client wants is what the client wants, right? And it's like we have gotten some incredibly weird requests, and it's like, well, this isn't a complete solution. We're not going to get audio over here. There could be some problems with them. A lot of times they don't care, but that makes them really happy. And that's that is some of the nuance, I think, to what we do that I guess makes it fun, right?
Yeah. So prior to being in the actual industry, I would have told you that a speaker is a speaker. And what I mean by that is that I didn't know the quality and the back end design and engineering of speakers and what makes sound pop. I would have just bought something where I can listen to music and called it good enough. But now I have that ear where I can really tell the difference between a low quality speaker and a high quality speaker. And some of the craziest demos I've ever been to, I went to a demo at CEDIA and I literally had tears in my eyes during The Greatest Showman. It was the L Acoustics one. It was just the most amazing sound I've ever heard. It hit me emotionally. And I think once you understand that not every speaker is built the same, you have a true appreciation for the quality of sound.
Yeah, absolutely. We are always on the front. We're always changing things. When we come out with something, it's very likely a year later we've done a lot of revisions. We really do listen to all our dealers. When we get feedbacks, like we implement a lot more than I think people realize. And it's a lot of CI installer friendly stuff. We're a little bit more thoughtful on certain things because we know that it saves time and money in the field, right? And we hold, I don't know how many patents that Origin holds, but we hold a lot of, I think that's Nick's thing.
Yeah.
He loves doing patents. He loves being the guy who really thinks about all the ones and the twos and the details. And he's the one that spends the time with dealers and isolates them, right? Like, you can't get 10 dealers and ask them questions because you're going to get some people who don't speak up and then the masses kind of, say all the same thing. But if you start breaking people down individually and you have relationships, they're going to really, really tell you. And he really goes after getting feedback from some of our local guys and some of the, guys that are, in other parts of the country. And we really design products, I think, for our dealers. I mean, I'm a CI guy, and man, what I wouldn't have done for toolless mounting, what I wouldn't have done for bayonet rings and modularity to upsell in the moment, because as we know, projects change and you can't do certain things. Well, guess what? If you're not doing a speaker there, you just get the, HVAC seal and put a cover over it and you call it a day. It's holding your place on the ceiling so you can make sure that you get your products in those homes, whether it is phase 1 or it's a multi-phase project.
Right. And I know that Origin Acoustics really is the go-to manufacturer for custom integration speakers. Like, I know how popular you guys are. I know the company I work at, Eagle Sentry, buys a ton of your guys' speakers.
Yeah.
So I would really say that Origin is kind of the gold standard for in-ceiling, I guess, in-wall speakers.
I couldn't agree with you more. I really could. I mean, there's a lot of fantastic stuff out there. And there might be some, some niche bespoke stuff out there that is definitely really good. Some of those Martin Logan in-walls, man, they sound freaking great. They really, really do. Yeah. And there's no knock on all these companies because I'm real passionate about audio. And Origin hasn't been the only thing that we sold, but I think that, that product sounds really good. And if that's not enough, we have Ambisonic and a full custom shop coming in. So Kyle Ebeling, he is our lead engineer for Ambisonic. He was James Loudspeakers former lead engineer, and he actually knew Jeffrey James Coombs. He got his job by being his daughter's water polo coach. So they grew up, and he really, really got mentored and really taught a lot. And that man is freaking genius. So when it comes to, I want a subwoofer hidden in my stairwell, like we can do that now. I want a custom Lamborghini red soundbar, like we're going to be able to do that soon. We have planters and this and that. We can do full line arrays. We just brought in dual 18s, dual 15s, and we have already dual 12s and dual 10s, right? So we're growing our whole entire custom department for anything that's going to be outside of regular Origin performance, right? This is magnetic planar ribbon tweeters. This is higher output coaxial speakers. This is things that, we in-house voice to be incredibly accurate, but have just insane amounts of high dynamic range. So there's a whole custom portion to Origin that's coming, and that is the ability to kind of make dreams happen. You got something that's outside the box. Let me get Kyle. We're going to sit down and we're going to come up with a solution for you. We're doing a custom soundbar on a Bucati dealership or something like that. And it's a 42-foot long line array soundbar where we've rechanged all of our tweeter positions so we get the right splay and the right dispersion. Like, if you haven't heard our line arrays, because I invited you, I think, like last week, and we had our dual 18s with our dual 12s and the line arrays at like 130 dB, just pin. I mean, it was the reaction and the emotion that you got from dealers. And these are CI guys going, these are the best things I've ever heard. And I know that they've heard some really gangster stuff. Right? Really gangster stuff. But it makes me feel good. I know that it makes, Nick Berry and Origin really happy to hear those things from our dealers because we believe that we are doing something unique.
And it sounds like you're really proud to work for Origin Acoustics. It sounds like you guys have really great people and that you're really proud of the products that you put out into the world.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody there has and fills their little role in that company. They are hyper-focused and ready to serve dealers, ready to do cool things. And that's, I joke a little bit with dealers that I have on the phone and people that I work with Origin. Some of my happiest days was me sitting in a closet with like 1,000 network cables and 2 racks, some music and a headlamp, and my apprentice and my other installers were out doing other things. Like I do, and this design services thing is to get us closer to what CI is and what CI does. And that's, I think, my passion, right? Being closer to some of the cool things because I don't get to install those things very much. And I don't get to see them and go out to the client's home. That's a still, burning passion of mine to be closer to the customer. And I'm trying to get, Origin a little bit closer to our dealers and a little bit closer to our customers because if the client experience is right, then it's right for the dealer. Right. Some people think about the dealer experience, and it really should be the client experience, in my opinion.
Right. So the dealer is really just the middleman for the client, but we want to make everyone happy. And I know that can be challenging at times, but it sounds like Origin's really knocking it out of the park on all levels, whether that's, making the dealers happy as well as making the clients happy. So I think that's the most important part.
Yep. And we do a lot of things for our dealers. Like we have, gig events, every other month. And we bring in anywhere between, 50 and 70 dealers. And they come and they learn all about our Origin brand. But we also bring in people like Matt Bernath that does, business coaching. For the people that don't understand what metrics and what analytics I need to be looking at to make sure that I have a net operating profit after taxes of at least 18%, right? I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah. Well, so what's your favorite part about working at Origin Acoustics? So you made the transition a few years back from where you worked at for 2 decades, Best Buy. What's the best part about working at Origin Acoustics?
100% I like being in front of dealers, man. I really do. I love our gig events. I love trying to give back to them. Like I was mentioning, the Matt Bernath, the Jason, the HTSA, all these people that we bring in that are hyper-focused on the dealer, right? We don't bring in and be like, hey, it's Origin all the time. It's half Origin and a half about you guys, right? So that's something that I really like about Origin, right? Is that we're dealer focused. We are the CI, we're the CI, we're the people's company, right? And it feels good working for that organization, always being an advocate. It's the dealers, it's the customers. So my number one thing are those gig events, man. Like, I really do like talking about your guys' in-home experience and some of the products that we have that kind of serve you, or what are you doing, right? Like, there's a couple of dealers that are doing super crazy cool stuff, right? And it's like, I always hit them up. Hey man, what are you doing? Mystic Joe, right? Mystic Joe in Arizona. He's doing some wild, cool stuff. He's one of my favorites. And every time he's in town, dude, show me your photos because you're doing stuff that I've never seen before. Yeah. And it's freaking cool. So that's it. Being with dealers, talking about the things that I love, you know, like, my first surround sound I got when I was 12. Yeah. Right? It was a hand-me-down AVR Pioneer from my dad. It was a KL8 center channel, KL8's rear channels, and a KL8's passive subwoofer. And for 12, I was like, Dad, I want surround sound. So he took me to Ultimate Electronics, to his sales guy. Yeah. I bought a pair of, I think they're Techniques or something at the time. I still have them. They're in my garage, not wired up. And, you know, I wired up my system. And I was the only, you know, 12-year-old with Dolby Pro Logic too. And I had the subwoofer and I cut that out because it sounded like shit, but I left it there because it looked cool. Yeah. Right. So, you know, I've kind of been doing this stuff for so long. It's just ingrained like kind of into my DNA, man. Like, I don't want to be an accountant.
Right. I mean, from everything I've gathered from our conversation, you love the smart home industry. You love custom integration. It sounds like this is truly a passion of yours. Like, the way you say it best, like, you wouldn't want to be an accountant. So I think it's really, I mean, I relate to your story that you're talking about with your hand-me-down speaker set. Like, I don't have the best quality surround sound system. It's a hand-me-down system, but I am so grateful that I even have that because I love geeking out on it. I hooked it up myself. You know, I have my small little, I think it's a 21U rack at home. It's like, I love geeking out on it just as much as you, but it sounds like really it's the love for serving, you know, bringing everyone together. So that's the dealers and the clients. And I think it's bringing around like-minded people together so we can all kind of geek out on what we're passionate about.
Yeah, you know, it's like, you know, they talk about like love languages. My love language is service, man. I like taking care of people. I want to make sure people are happy. I want to make sure people are getting what they're supposed to be getting. I want to be on spec, on point, and on time. Right? Doesn't take much. Yeah. Doesn't take much to be on the front side of things, and that's what it is for me, man. Just being there, being with dealers, talking about truly what it is that I care about, you know, whether that's lighting and circadian rhythm, or it's acoustics and, you know, reducing the noise floor so people, you know, have a better experience in their home, right? Like, we all went through COVID. I have children. Locking a bunch of children in my house, and they're doing kindergarten class next to me, and, you know, 4th grade, you know, in the room over. Like, I had a high noise floor. Like, I know what that feels like. Yeah. Ketra and blue light and all of that stuff, and doing I mean, that stuff is beautiful. If you've never been around circadian rhythm, turn that on to a circadian rhythm and see when the color temperature change, how you don't fall into your chair and just start getting sleepy. Yeah. Right? Like, it's freaking great. And those are the things that I just truly it's an X factor that makes you perform better. It makes you happy. Right? It's all these things. Listening to music, right? Like, how do you set the mood, right? Well, it's the right music and the right lighting, right? Bring it down, set your scenes, right? You got good ambient light, not a lot of task light, and I got some music that I love, right?
So we're almost out of time for today, but I want to bring up one final topic, and really your circadian rhythm comment kind of sparked this in me. So I come from the DIY smart home style. So Apple in their HomeKit platform has adaptive lighting, which is basically circadian rhythm. Talk to me about where your view is on the DIY smart home, because it's only continuing to grow.
Yeah. So, you know, every industry has life cycles, right? You got, you know, you have the boom, you have the growth, and you have the fall off. And some part of me feels like we are in a little bit of a fall off because DIY devices are getting better and they're getting more support and they're being more thoughtful. That was not always the case. Right. Most DIY stuff that you would put into clients' homes would literally not work. Right. It just doesn't work in certain applications. And you're getting to the point where people can go and they can get their Eros and they can get, you know, your Netgear, whatever's with like 1 gig backhaul, and that's a halfway decent product. Yeah. And I do believe that more and more we're going to see decreases in, smart home product purchases. But there's always going to be things that make what we do unique, right? Like circadian rhythm lighting, right? Like, yeah, that's something that you can do at DIY in a 3,000 square foot house, but that's not something that you can do DIY in a 8,000 square foot house. It's just not going to work, right? Having the thoughtfulness, a lot of people know what they want, but they don't know what they want, right? Like lighting is a really good example because I would program this, right? And you'd go in, you're saying, hey, you're going from, Lutron Interactive to Lutron Homeworks. I'm going to change up your programming quite a bit, and I'm going to do a lot more single action stuff, right? And those clients ended up hating it, right? Yeah. Or you get clients that, a Lutron guy said this, the more wealthy the client, the more sensitive they are to light. And there's almost no truer things that I've heard because they spend more time in their house. Yeah. They're more sensitive to light. But things like Joss AI is where I'm going with this, right? Keep your real estate and your keypads nice and clean, nice and tight. Yeah. But then all your subjective, unique programming, you can then now talk into a system that's closed loop, right? Like this is huge because Amazon and Echo, I don't have any of them in my house because if I start talking about freaking birdseed, then I start getting ads about birdseed, right? So some of that stuff kind of wigs me out. Very wealthy clients care about their health and their safety, right? And the shift that we're starting to see is more energy management and photovoltaics and things of that nature, right? We're doing a lot more lighting and shades because we're starting to realize that sitting indoors with bad lighting all day is not only bad for your health, but it's bad for your eyes, right? Like vitamin D is super important to you.
For sure. I supplement with vitamin D, but I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think you made a lot of great smart home predictions on what's going to happen in the future. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how our industry continues to evolve because one thing is for certain that the industry is going to evolve, and I think you, myself, Origin Acoustics, Eagle Sentry is really on the cutting edge of serving our clients and making sure that they are in the most advanced smart homes possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Eagle's been around forever, man. I've had a bunch of friends work there. I mean, you guys are killing it, with all of your things. Your showroom is absolutely beautiful, right? There's 2 jail phantoms and some.
It goes crazy,
and it sounds freaking great. And it's acoustically treated. You didn't overkill the room response. Like it is real nice theater you guys have in your showroom. Is beautiful, right? Big giant display, a bunch of lighting, right? Like those are the things that DIY guys can't do. They can't do lighting. They can't be thoughtful about scene programming. Yeah. They can't be, you got to be a little bit more thoughtful about how this all comes together, right? Like the installer in me and the CI guy in me goes, well, it's application first, then it's installation, then what product, right?
Right.
Transactional, it's completely the opposite. What product? Right? Like it's just a different workflow. So being able to do those things and think about things like that, man, just I think is what will keep the CI industry a little bit safer, right? Yeah. I would really love to see us have like maybe not a union, but like be actually treated like a trade. I know there was a lot of executives in Washington, D.C. lobbying for this. And what I wouldn't do to have our industry truly recognized. This industry raised me. It turned me into a man. It taught me skills. Like, I don't have to feel like I'm, this stupid kid that has no skills, right? Like, I have something to fall back on. And that's AV, and that's automation, and that's lighting, and that's home theater, and that's all the stuff that I love. And I would love that to be more credentialed because technology is only growing, and people are only going to need more support and more services. Things kind of come out, So to have something credentialed, I think would actually help, our industry, right? We're journeyman electricians, right? You could, it's like if there's a master electrician on the job site, he's the gangster, and that's the guy that you can talk. Like if there's a master, accredited national AV installer, like those are the guys that you want on your projects, right? Like you don't want the apprentice electrician out there. You don't want the apprentice guy. Like I think there could be some real credibility that would help our industry by standardizing it, with an actual trade.
Cool. And, I'll leave it there, but you're absolutely right that we need to treat the low voltage industry as a more serious trade. And last week's guest, Paul Starkey, is actually making it his mission to help train people to become low voltage technicians with his company Prep Tech. And they basically find candidates, vet candidates, train candidates, and place them. So Paul is really on the forefront of making this happen. And it's really incredible that I get to surround myself with really the best and the brightest minds in the industry. Like, it's been incredible to have you on the show today, hear where you came from, hear about your experience, and truly hear how passionate you are about it. Because, you know, I am relatively new to the smart home industry, but to see a veteran like yourself and hear how passionate you still are is really incredible. And I think that you're still pursuing the industry with good faith, and that you're happy to be there and happy to serve these clients. And it's really refreshing. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Robert.
Absolutely, Chris, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you having me, man. This was exciting. I've never done anything like this, but
this has been his first podcast. And folks, I don't know if you noticed, but we changed it out today. Monster, courtesy of Robert and Origin Acoustics. So cheers to Monster, and we are out. This has been Elevation with Chris Orem, episode number 8. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.